triangle and the different elements of that. You understand that looking through the viewfinder is how you're going to meter and figure out whether you're too bright or too dark. But at the same time that you're metering, one of the cool things is you're also picking your focus point. Now, every camera is a little bit different, and every camera probably has a couple different modes, so I suggest that you make sure you take a look at your camera manual to understand what those different modes are doing. For the purpose of this class, we're going to just use spot focus. We're going to use one single focus point to pick what we're going to focus on. You're going to look through the viewfinder, and at the same time you're metering, or at the same time you're half pressing, it's going to meter and it's going to focus on your subject. So if I'm shooting a portrait or a person, I like to pick the eye to focus on, because that'll put the whole person in focus. I pick the eye, I half press, I tweak my different settings, aperture, shutter, and ISO to make sure I got the perfect balance. And then I half press once again to focus on the eye, compose the picture, and then I finish by pressing the picture and I capture the image. Now, if you're shooting something that's not a portrait, such as a group of people, for instance, you're going to want to pick the middle person or somebody that's where most of the people are on the same focal plane. If you're shooting a scene in the street and you've got a friend running across the street, you're going to pick a point on their body. I like to aim for the chest because that's a good mid-ground for them. And then you're gonna focus and take the picture. Now, it gets a little tricky when you're shooting a landscape because if you're out in the wild and you got this thing on a tripod and you're trying to take a picture of a big scene, it's like, what do I point it at? Do I point at the mountain in the background? Do I point it at this mailbox in the front? I mean, what do you point the focus at? I like to point the focus at a point that's about a third of the way into the picture. So let's set the scene. You've got a river right at your feet. You've got grass in between the river and a mountain all the way in the background. Where is the third? The third is where the back of the river meets the grass. And I'll pick like a thing. It could be a tree. It could be a big giant rock that's in the scene. Pick something that you can focus on and then recompose and shoot that scene. By shooting a third of the way into the image, you'll be able to capture most of everything that you need in a good focal plane, which is how you're gonna have a nice crisp and sharp image. So the last thing we wanna touch on before we head out and take some photos is what format you should shoot your pictures in. If you're new to DSLR, which you probably are, you probably have heard a lot of debate over whether you should shoot in RAW or JPEG. For the purpose of this conversation, we don't really need to go in what RAW is or what a JPEG is, but let's just keep it simple and short. If you shoot in RAW, you're gonna unlock the potential of your camera. So shoot in RAW. That's all you need to know. Now, if you're thinking, oh, RAW's too much of a headache and I kind of want to be able to take a JPEG and put it right on Instagram or use the picture right away, that's fine. What I suggest, and a lot of new DSLRs will allow you to do, especially if you have a decent sized memory card, is shoot in both. There's a setting on the camera, consult your manual. You can shoot in RAW plus JPEG, and that allows you to have both. But I would never take my camera out without shooting in RAW, because you'll find out later when we talk about retouching that if you shoot in RAW, you have a lot more flexibility and versatility with the file afterwards. So if you shoot something that's a little too dark or a little too bright, you can recover it and still make the file usable, and it's still a beautiful image to use for the future. So use RAW if you can and whenever possible. And if you don't want to just use RAW because you want to have the option of using JPEG, use both. Another great benefit of shooting in RAW is it will allow you to deal with a lot of corrections after the fact. So for instance, we're going to shoot our camera with our white balance on auto. And sometimes the camera, or a lot of the times the camera is going to be spot on. But sometimes you're going to run into a case where the white balance is off, and later we'll show you how to correct issues like that in retouching.